here we are, Todd Nelson, almost in the exact same spot nearly 22 years ago that you first embarked on Grand Rapids, Michigan as a player, the very first player signed. In fact, why don't we go ahead and make it real? That's not the exact hat, but it's a replica. It's pretty close. The old logo, Todd Nelson, of course, congratulations, is now an assistant coach of the Dallas Stars, but thoughts about sitting here and the fact that it was nearly 22 years ago that you first came to Grand Rapids, experienced this wonderful city.
Well, you know what? It was a situation where I was up in Waskesiu, which is a lake north of my hometown, and enjoying summer vacation, and went to the payphone in Waskesiu and called my agent, and he goes, you got to get in the car and come back here with your family because there's going to be a press conference. We just got a deal done with Grand Rapids. And that's how it all started. So we came back here and had the press conference right in the spot. In fact, the only section that had seats was right there. And we all had to wear hard hats until I had to put the hat on. But it was a very exciting time because how it all happened is I signed a 3-year deal with the Philadelphia Flyers. And the season prior to coming here, I played in Hershey the whole season and probably had my best year and did not get called up. I started thinking, well, I'm 25, 26 years old now. You know, if I'm going to play in the minors, I'd rather play in the IHL. And so my agent had a conversation with Bobby Clark, who was the GM of Philadelphia, and just asked him straight out, Todd has 2 more years left on his deal. Do you see any kind of future for him? And he said, well, we brought him to Hershey to be one of the veteran guys to work with the younger players, but that's our primary goal with him. And so hearing that, we reached out to Bob McNamara, and I knew Bob from my playing days in Cleveland when he was working in the front office there. And he expressed interest. And so essentially what happened is Grand Rapids bought the remaining 2 years of the contract. And so that's how I ended up here. And
so convinced that this was going to be a great place for you and your family, you bought a house here. A house you still own to this day, nearly 22 years later. I got married a year and a half prior. We just had our first baby, my son Colton. And I was pretty familiar with Grand Rapids because I played hockey for 2 seasons in Muskegon prior to that. And I saw what the city was doing. When I used to come to practice here in Kentwood, because there was no other rinks available in Muskegon, we had to make the drive and practice in Kentwood. This whole area down here was pretty rough. All the old buildings you see here that have been redone, they had broken windows. It was kind of depressed, but then when I got to the rink and saw how the city was rebuilding, it was pretty exciting. So we ended up buying a house because we had to sink in roots somewhere. And so we bought a house, and I'm not in the same house. I moved down about 3 doors from my original house in 2000, but right now we still live in that house today. Some of your best memories as a player on this very surface or on the playing surface of other arenas around the International Hockey League at that time? Opening night was definitely really special. I think everybody's seen the picture, the panoramic picture of the building was sold out, and it was sold out the whole first year. It was a lot of fun to play here. It was a very exciting time. I think in that first season, we got off to a bit of a rough start, but we traded some guys, got some new guys in. We brought in some grit to our lineup, and we ended up being the best team after Christmas. And we ended up losing to Orlando in the first round, but we had them down 2-0, and I think that's a pretty big regret of ours because we had them down 2-0, playing both games down there, and then we came back home and we couldn't finish it off here at home. But it was a special year, and I got to play with my brother that year too. He was on the team. A lot of good memories, playing with Travis Richards, Michel Picard, the late Pavel Dimitra. It was a lot of fun. And then the second year was kind of a transition year where Dave Allison got let go, I think around in January or February. And our team didn't do all that well. We made the playoffs, but we lost in the first round again. But I think the special year was in 2000 when I played hockey the year before in Germany. I thought I was going to be able to get something done here. It didn't work out that way. So I went over to Helsinki, played for about a month, and then fate has it Johnny Gruden that was playing here broke his wrist, and they're looking for a defenseman. And they asked me if I wanted to come back, and I said definitely. I said
I'm here by myself. My family's back in Grand Rapids, and just made sense. And came back to a team that was working with Ottawa at the time, and we had a lot of good young players. We had some good veterans, and didn't finish off the way we wanted to, but we lost in Game 6 to the Chicago Wolves in the finals. But it was a very special year. Had a great time.
Well, and you mentioned a lot of great names, names that certainly are held closely to the hearts of a lot of longtime Griffin fans, myself included. Of course, you left here eventually and then dive into the coaching. So it was right here you signed as a player, Nelly. It was up front of the arena where you came on board and were officially introduced as the head coach of the Grand Rapids Griffins. So we're going to head up there and reminisce a little bit and talk about these last 3 years as the head coach of the Grand Rapids Griffins. So from playing to coaching, actually, it came right back. It wasn't long after you got done playing here. In fact, you talked about that 2000 season, the run of the Calder Cup or Turner Cup finals in the IHL. You came back here a couple of years later as an assistant coach, but then a long gap in between the 02-03 campaign and 2015, where in this very room, Todd Nelson, you were introduced as the 10th head coach in Grand Rapids Griffins history.
Yeah, you know what? It's been a great 3 years here. It's a situation where Detroit gave us a great opportunity to win hockey games. You know what? And to cap it off with the championship last year, I think that was the pinnacle of the last 3 years. You know, but it was a lot of fun. You know, it was a lot of fun winning games here. We got great support from the fans, but also I think as a staff, I think we're very proud of the players that have went on and graduated and are now playing in the National Hockey League. Just to mention a few: Anthony Mantha, Andreas Athanasiou, Thomas Nosek, Martin Firk, Nick Jensen. I'm sure I'm missing quite a few other guys, but it's nice to see that we were able to accomplish our goal of winning, but also developing players.
And culminating, of course, in 2017. June 13th was the date you won your very first Calder Cup as a head coach. I'm guessing that's got to be the highlight of probably your lifetime in hockey, correct?
Yeah, you know what? It was a very special year. You know, we had a special group here, very good hockey players. You know, we won the championship. We had a good record throughout the season. There wasn't really any lulls in the season. Got to coach in the All-Star game. We ended up winning that All-Star Classic. So it was a very special year. You know, I've won cups in the past, but to do it as a head coach in the American Hockey League is really special for me. Now I'm going to work on trying to find a way to win the bigger prize, the Stanley Cup, and so I'm looking forward to the opportunity and also the challenge that comes with it.
Before you came here, Coach, everybody knows you were in Edmonton, got about a 4-month stint with the Oilers, got that taste of a head coaching position in the National Hockey League. Many felt that you should have been retained and given a chance to work a full year in Edmonton. Didn't work out that way, much to our benefit because we were able to get Todd Nelson back home for the last 3 years. But now you're taking that step to the National Hockey League as an assistant coach, something that I remember talking to you about a year ago that really wasn't front and center in your mind. You felt like, I'm ready to be a head coach in the NHL, but now you understand this might be the next step now to getting that permanent National Hockey League head coaching job.
Yeah, like you never know what path is right. You know, I've had plenty of conversations with many people in the hockey world about what the best thing to do is. Either stay here, because I had 2 years left here, or move on. And then when I started thinking about it, with the exception of that brief stint in Edmonton, I've been a head coach for the last 8 years in the American Hockey League, and so I was looking for something new. Last year, at this point, that wasn't the case. This year, it was just a bit different, and you know, I talked to 3 different teams, all quality teams, but the one that jumped out at me was Dallas, because they hired a fresh head coach who I know very well, and you know, Dallas has a lot of good pieces to their lineup. They have guys that can score, they have good goaltending, they have some good young defensemen, and it's a team that can get in the playoffs, and that's the ultimate goal. When you get to the National Hockey League, the ultimate goal is the Stanley Cup. You still have to develop some guys, but it's not like the American Hockey League where you're trying to get them to take the next step. They're already there, but now you just have to refine their game.
Jim Montgomery is that head coach out of the University of Denver. Jim Nill, the former assistant GM in Detroit, is I'm sure had a lot to do with luring Todd Nelson down to Dallas.
Jim Nill definitely had an influence of bringing me there. I worked for him in 2003 when I was an assistant coach here. And he's just, like a very special man. And Jim Montgomery and I have very similar philosophies on how to coach, so it's going to be very exciting. And one of the most important things he said to me during the interview process, he goes, "You're not going to be working for me." He goes, "You're going to be working with me." He goes, "I'm going to lean on you quite a bit." He goes, "You have National Hockey League experience." He goes, "I don't." As a player he did, but as a coach he has not. So it's a pretty exciting time. It was a tough decision to make, but I feel that I can definitely use some more NHL experience. So maybe in the future somebody comes calling, but if not, I'm coaching in the best league in the world, and it's very exciting.
I can see the emotion in you in your Sports Overtime chat with Larry Figursky and Jack Doles as well. You can, and we know you as well as anybody, how hard this is going to be for you to pull away from Grand Rapids. Yeah,
it is. You know what? I got a lot of good friends here that, we've kept in touch over the years, but especially coming back the last 3 years, getting to see a lot of familiar faces. And Grand Rapids is a very big part of our life. For 22 years we've owned a house here, and it's just a great place to live. And I pretty much had my dream job working here in Grand Rapids, living in my house, being around family and friends. But sometimes you have to get out of your comfort zone. And I had a real nice phone call from Jimmy Devellano. He said, I remember the conversation that we had last year at the draft, where you're going to give it another shot this year to see if you can land a head job in the National League, but if it doesn't work out, he's told me last year that you may be looking to be an assistant, and that's exactly what happened. And I was very fortunate to have 3 different teams talk to me, and I think it's going to be a great challenge, and I'm looking forward to it.
Let's see, I was estimating about 260 pregame interviews you and I did, Coach, over 3 years, not to mention all the other sit-downs, including this one. About 200 plus days on the road together during those 3 years, riding the buses and the planes and hotels and all the great rinks and cities around the league. Can't thank you enough for everything. Best of luck.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Really appreciate it.